Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Chat Space. We are joining you here live. Thank you all for tuning in, those who will tune in now, and those who are going to watch this live stream later. I am Ted Douglas, Empowerment Program Manager at Prism Health North Texas. Joining me today, we have Sophia Rosales, Sadie Nishwaya, and January Fox, and we are going to be discussing the awesome topic of voting. So many of you may not be aware, but next Tuesday, September 28th, yes, it's my birthday. I know we all know that. Maybe you don't know that. I'm going to tell you anyway. But in addition to my birthday, it is actually a very important day. It is National Voter Registration Day. So this is a day where, we have the opportunity to register to vote because although right now there is no election happening, tomorrow, they sneak up on us very quickly. And today we just wanted to hop on for a little while to discuss the importance of voting, what voting does, why you should care, why it matters. And so we're going to just jump right in. So to my esteemed ladies on this panel, why is voting so important?
I don't know. I feel like it's a right. It's like my civil duty to vote. Like I get excited about it. Like when you get like your driver's license, it's like a milestone is what I think in my head about it. Now that I understand that, it's me speaking out of my voice. So the way I explain it to everybody else is, you want people to know where you stand on things, you should vote. If you want people to talk about things, and I feel like, as you learn more and more about all these certain things that are happening, like current events, I think there's only change in that if you're deciding to vote. And that's my stance on it.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with what Sadie said. Voting, the end result of voting is how policy is going to be formed and who's at the table when that policy is formed. And so if we want it to be more representative and look like the communities that we serve, we need more people of color running for office, period, number one. And number two, voting is so important, like Sadie said, because right now we're looking at the results of arguably the wrong people being at the table. So we've got a 6-week abortion ban. We've got open carry. We've got a ban on open camping in public. We've got changes to our voter registration, our voter voting laws, period. And we've got, teachers frustrated because they don't know how they're going to teach actual history in schools. All of these things were passed during this last state election cycle. And there is a state election every other year. And so every other year we have an opportunity to change who is sitting at that table. And it's not going to happen until people start to vote.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I agree with both of y'all. I don't really have anything else to add.
Awesome. So, January, you mentioned how, there are laws passed that, impact voting. And I guess we, kind of know that as voter suppression. I'm not sure if people really understand how those tactics of voter suppression really work and how they, really infringe upon their rights. As Sadie said, voting is a right. It's a right that we have. It's a right that people have literally, fought and died for. And, it's we see it from time to time where there will be these bills and things introduced to try to limit or make it more difficult for individuals to vote. So how do some of those things actually work, and how do some of those things actually come into play?
So number one, we should never make voting more difficult. We should be taking away barriers to voting as opposed to putting more barriers in place. And a few things that we saw pass during this last session are, so I live in Houston, and And in Houston, like, they did such a good job during the last presidential election. We had 24-hour voting. We had drive-up voting because we were in the middle of COVID and people didn't want to go inside. We had more access to mail-in ballots. People were able to get mail-in ballots. All of those things are off the table as of now. So no 24-hour voting. No increased ballot access, including for the elderly. There's more barriers in place for them as well. No drive-up voting, and a lot of other things. And this happens because once again, the people who are sitting at the table that we elect to be our state representatives and our state senators, once they're there, they really hold most of the cards, not all of the cards, because advocacy is certainly an important piece and can change things. But it happened. Texas meets every other year for 140 days. The one thing they have to get done is a balanced budget, and everything else is icing on the cake. But during those 140 days, they always tend to do a considerable amount of damage because it moves very quickly and because there's not always a lot of time to organize. And I think that's by design.
Yeah, because I missed out. I liked the curbside voting. I got to do that last election season. So I'm a little bit upset. I liked that. I didn't have to get out of my car and do nothing. So.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's obviously an issue, and it's something that, we need to be aware of. And I think it speaks to what you stated, that we have to be, I think of it in this manner, that we are partially responsible because we are the ones who are electing the people into office. Whether we decide to go out and vote or whether we decide not to vote, we are still making a decision. It is still going to happen regardless. So it's hard to, say, oh, well, we have all these issues and these things are going on and, there is nobody for us, but we have to be for ourselves. And part of being for ourselves is making a decision to vote for someone who, well, first of all, making a decision to vote and then voting for someone who actually has the interests of the people at heart and their community. What do you all think? How do you all think that, I know some of us live in different areas. How do you all think that your local communities feel about voting? Like, do you think that has there been a good voting turnout from your local communities, or how has it gone over the last couple of election seasons that you've seen?
I mean, for me, so I live in District 13, which is Victory Meadow, and the voter turnout is really not that good because it is predominantly immigrant and refugee, and language barriers are there. And so a lot of the residents in the district really don't understand voting and how it works, or they're not necessarily, they're undocumented. So it really puts a barrier on them as far as issues that are affecting them the most. I mean, there's communication because there is an action community group in the area, but there's still challenges that come across that with people that are undocumented. So the voter turnout the last election season wasn't as great.
I also think that there's I don't know about y'all, but growing up in just going through different classes in middle school and high school, I think the most common misconception is that we vote for the president and the president makes all the decisions. And that's even in my courses I'm taking in my public health degree, I'm learning that that's not the case at all. And that it really lies in our communities and who we vote into Senate and the legislation. And that's where all of the control is. The president doesn't have much control. And I feel like a lot of people think that they do, but they really don't. So, I mean, even in community voting, those spaces, they're not educated about who they're voting for, why they're voting for them. And also the lack of education and the oppression for Black and Brown communities as a whole is probably the biggest barrier that a lot of people see, including myself. I am white and I'm aware of my privilege and know that I have a lot of different access points than a lot of other people do. So I would really love to see more organizations, even like the one that I work for, work to promote education and things around that.
Yes, absolutely. And, that was one of the things that I wanted to touch on as well. The fact that those elections are different. And, many people, they wait until when they vote for during the presidential election. But those local and the state elections are so important to the actual individual on a personal level, because those are the things that really matter, such as like the abortion laws and things like you know there's just so many things that really matter on a more personal level than what the presidential election does. I'm glad that you brought up that point, because that's so important, and I think more people need to be aware of that. And it is, I think, a big lack of education, because people don't know. And so we got to have more communication, more conversations like this to inform people that, hey, you do need to look into these other elections, because they are important. These are the people who are making some of the decisions that are actually going to impact you. A lot of the decisions that are made on the national level, many of those things don't necessarily trickle down to our everyday life. They just don't. But when you are considering the local elections, and the state elections, what type of money they are funding into different social services programs and things like that, that matters. That matters to, a host of our communities.
Do y'all remember whenever the elections were happening in Texas, like the early voting in Houston, there was a man that was arrested for waiting in line for, it was like a very long time, and he got arrested for voting because he had like 30 days left of parole. Right, January? Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, but that is a good thing to bring up, though, that often people think that because you have a felony that you're never able to vote again, and that's not true. Once you've served your time and once your parole is over, you can register to vote again. And that's how it is here in Texas. Amazingly, don't tell anybody. They try to take that away from us too. But that's a state by state thing. But that's something that is decided on a state by state level. So if that ever came up, then that's something you probably want to know about.
And to be honest, I think that he was solely arrested because he was Black. I think if it were to be of someone living in the white experience, this would have never happened. But I don't know. Personally, I think it's absolutely ridiculous, and it's because of the laws that we're voting for and the people that we're voting into these positions. So, like I said, like being a part of like the community-based elections and stuff like that for people who will potentially run for Senate and run for governor and things like that are very important.
Absolutely. I mean, just look at some of the things that, we have, some of these laws and bills that have been put into place. I know a lot of people hate the whole mask thing, and like there's all of this happening, with the like the city of Dallas. Dallas judge had put something into place for the local areas to wear masks for a mask mandate, and of course the governor had an issue with that. So the governor sued him, and he sued the governor, and it's just like all of this back and forward. And about like the schools and how like they don't want the schools to be to have masks in the schools, but if children begin to die, then I think maybe a tune will be changed. And it really, to me, it shouldn't take all that. It's about protecting the people and doing what's right for your community. And as I stated, we have to hold ourselves accountable for electing individuals to do that. If there's not someone who you feel like is representing you well at your local or state level, maybe you need to become that person. Maybe we need to find people that we can empower to go and say, hey, I think you would do a great job at doing this. I mean, if a celebrity can become president, surely, a regular person can be a senator or any of these other positions, any of these other offices, political offices. So it's possible, and we need people. We need people who are actually going to go out, who's going to do the work, who are for the community, who look like the community, and is going to actually represent to address the issues that the various communities have, because we can't expect some high privileged white man to really know the impact and know the struggle of a poor Black person who may be living in some impoverished area. We can't expect them to really buy in and say that I'm going to take care of your issues, I'm going to address your issues because I understand what you're going through. They really don't. They could have some type of idea based on theory, but there's nothing like lived experience.
Very true.
And I think a person who has a lived experience, they're going to go and they're going to really make a difference. Should I say they can anyway. So how does the voter registration process work? How can a person actually register to vote who wants to register?
Is it frozen? Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, it's not frozen. Oh, okay. I was like, everybody was like still. I didn't know what was going on. Okay. You're wanting to.
We're all looking at you, Sadie. We're like, Sadie.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. What was the question? I don't even know. I thought it was frozen.
Voter registration can happen usually if you fill out a form, and these forms are available through like a lot of different platforms. We see platforms showing, Rock the Vote or whatever youth-based like funding people receive to make these things happen. The hard stop is obviously transportation, because you can't register to vote online. You can fill out the form and then you have to mail it out. So I think that's one of the more the big barriers, I think, for that from that perspective.
I can't even think. What was the question, Ted? What did you say the question was?
Oh, I was just getting someone to answer. How do you actually register to vote? What's that process? And Manny explained.
I was like, what did you say the question was? You waiting on me? I was like, on something else. Go ahead.
I'll just call you name this time.
Just
does anyone remember their first time voting?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like?
Barack Obama.
So I was actually like 26. I was 26, and this lady came up and she was like, "Hey, you want to vote?" And I was like, "Man, I'm not trying to vote for the president right now. My vote don't count." That's literally what I told her. My vote don't count. And she said, "Yes, it does." And then she was like, "Well, why don't you just try it? Like, what's the worst that could happen?" So, when people tell me stuff like that, I'm like, you know what? You're right. I'm just going to go ahead on and do it. I don't know. It felt really weird. It felt like you were making your civil duty. Like I said, it's a way I look at it is like you getting your permit or getting your driver's license. That's what I think of it as an equivalent of. Like, if you do that, you're an actual adult, is the way I looked at it. Yeah.
An actual adult.
Yeah, an actual adult. Everything else, I don't know. Everything else.
I totally said Barack Obama, but I just realized I wasn't old enough to.
I was like, yeah, were we not old enough to do that?
I knew I was in high school, like rooting for this to happen, but the first time I voted for was Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
During that time, I remember living in Plano, Texas, in Collin County, and I had no transportation, but I took the liberty of walking to the poll. A good 2 miles in the rain, and sure as hell made it there. And made it back with my cute little sticker, and it was a fun experience. I felt very empowered by that.
You sure you didn't just go for the sticker?
I definitely posted it on social media, just like everybody else does. Shut up. But, it was a really cool experience.
Yeah.
I gave my daughter's 19 now, but I gave on her 18th birthday, I gave her a voter registration card as her very first birthday present. We sat there and filled it out together. So that's how strongly I feel about voting. And my first vote was in 1990, I guess it would have been 94, for Ann Richards for governor. For her second. Oh my girl, don't say that. The year I was born. So that was really cool, but then devastating because she won. She lost, which kickstarted a now 20-year stronghold, Republican stronghold, where there has been zero Democratic. We have to stay nonpartisan, so I'm stating this as a fact. There are zero Democratic statewide leadership. And I think you see that reflected in the values of Texas today.
Yes.
Did anyone else experience like going through the poll, like a presidential poll, and like seeing all the other candidates for like Senate and not really knowing who they are and like just hitting well, I personally just hitting Democrat all the way down. I wish I would have, known more about each person that I hit, but like I said earlier, like there's like such a lack of education around those people specifically because everyone thinks that the president is just like this, the biggest thing that you can vote for. But I wish I would have been more prepared for the poll.
Me too. I ended up calling one of my really good friends who does a lot of work in this stuff. And I'm like, okay, so I didn't prepare for this. So tell me what to do.
Yeah, the first time I voted, I just kept, how you're in school and you don't know the answer, so you just pick C. That's exactly what I did. And then someone told me, they're like, hey, that candidate's Republican. And I was like, oh, I didn't know. Which one should I be? Is it the blue or is it the red? And they were like, I think you're going to have to figure that out for yourself. And I was like, well, no one told me. I didn't know. I just started pushing whatever I knew. You wanted me to do this. You asked me to vote. So look, this is what you're going to do.
Here you go. Okay.
Here you go. So,
I mean, at the same time, what does that say about politics and how politics don't really teach its public that they're supposed to be serving like the nitty gritty of these things? Like we see it with Republicans actions asking like people who are in that on that camp to believe these ridiculous spam emails, for example. And this is also an example of where we don't see Democratic people really break down the process in a way that it really resonates. And then what about all of the racist framework that is the electorate, the electorate college? And why are we still using a system that was introduced for the purposes of empowering slave owners? I don't understand why it hasn't been reformatted.
Absolutely.
That's a question a lot of us have.
Well, I wish there would be more, like I do remember like my economics teacher and government teacher like hitting like the basis of like voting, but it was nothing like that told me anything about like voting at the local level or anything like that. Like I did not know that I could really just challenge the person who representing my district a lot until I started reading up on my own. And now, I feel like it's a priority to, when people always ask me, I'm like, if you want to know the first thing about what's going on, you need to know your district and you know who's running in your district and you know what they stand for and what they're okay with. And you need to know, like, you got to know your community in order to be able to support them and help them. So, I mean, those are things I wish I knew when I was younger, because I definitely would have probably tried to challenge a little bit more.
Is there a list, like a universal list somewhere of like even just like Dallas County, like of the districts and who represents the districts anywhere?
Mm-hmm.
Where is it?
I'll send you a link. You can literally go to the Dallas County. I think it's Dallas County elections, and it will show you all of the people who are running each district, or who are the current candidates for your district. They all have websites. You can literally click on their website and you can see their views on certain things too.
Okay.
There's also, if you go to, if you Google who represents me, that will give you put in your address, your home address, and that tells you, it gives you who your city council person is, your state rep, your senator, state and local level, state and federal level, and your congressperson. So that's a really good, I think it gives you all their addresses and everything. So that's a really good tool.
Yeah.
Awesome. When I actually first voting experience was, I want to say I was in elementary school. We had like a little mock election. We were talking about it. I don't remember what election this was, but it had to have been something important. Maybe it was, I think it was George Bush, the son, not the daddy. I would think it may have been his first election. Yeah, that sounds right. I don't know, but I remember we talked about it. Like we went through the whole process, and like we talked about the different candidates, and they were explaining what it meant. And, I just thought it was so interesting. I guess as an adult, I think my first one was. I think it was like Barack Obama, the first one, that election. That was my first time voting. We have a person who commented on Facebook. She said, the first thing I did when I became a citizen in 1995 was vote. She voted. That was the first thing she did when she became a citizen. And she said she knows that people have a choice to vote or not, but she gets irritated when they don't and then they complain about the issues. That's what
One
happened.
of my biggest pet peeves is when
Same.
people say, what do they say? They're apolitical, or they're just not, they just stay out of politics. I'm just going to stay out of politics. I'm like, y'all, this affects literally every single level of your life. I mean, if we're talking about masks right now, it's being talked about at a federal level, but the state just went into a second special session today, and they had 30 days, and one of the governor's top topics is mask mandates and exceptions. So that's going to be debated, and then once that is more than likely passed, we'll see that trickle down at the local levels, because now you see like Judge Clay Jenkins and Judge Lena Hidalgo here in Houston. They're pushing back on the governor big time to try to get the masks. Those are all separate. The county is a separate election. The school boards are pushing back and trying to mandate masks at the school, at the county level. Once it's decided at a state level, there's nothing. There may be some legal challenges, but for all intents and purposes, it's a done deal. It's whatever the state says.
I feel like
Full of the
people
happy.
don't even they don't think about like they think about like current day and time, and they're not thinking about like what impact our voting has on future generations to come, and whether we want to be progressive or not. So I mean, with like the transgender bills and all those things happening in Texas, like they have no idea what impact this is going to have on a generational level and all the generational trauma to follow. And it's heartbreaking to watch, and people say they're apolitical and do all of those things when this could potentially impact, their own children and their children and the children to come. So I completely agree with you, January. I think it's a load of,
it's just how everybody is. You know how America is. If they don't really care about stuff until stuff actually like hits the fan. Then they're like, oh, I have to get involved. Oh, I have to find out what's going on. And I'm like, no. You keep my same energy all the time. Don't change it up, because I want to have things within my reach. So now that because even before, like when I first started voting, I didn't know anything about local and state level, and I didn't know that I really have the power to like speak and talk and hear them and listen to them and get my issues out, until I actually started doing my own reading. And once I realized that I could really say whatever I wanted to say, I was like, okay, my vote really does matter in those places. And that's what made me change,
And it matters more now than ever.
Oh yeah. Not that it ever didn't, but just intensified, if that makes sense.
And
even
that if they have the simplification of how the process works, because when you have a presidential election, that's going to look different because it's going to include the electoral college. Whereas if you have a smaller election, you're not going to have the same process. So that changes. So then your vote does really matter more in those cases, right?
Yeah.
I've seen elections that have literally been decided by 20 votes or less on the local level. Several times I've seen that happen. So, it really does matter, especially on those local levels. I mean, it can just absolutely decide. Well, it always decides which way a race is going to go, but sometimes it really is mega close.
Right.
And when we like take away this idea that politicizing something is bad, that's also important. That if everything's political and just live with it because that's how we get involved.
My favorite thing in the whole world is when people say, they mention stuff like, we're not going to be participate in this because we are not a political organization. And I'm like, okay, girl. So what you're trying to tell me is that you don't care about the communities that you are serving, is what you're trying to say. Because regardless if you're political or not, as a human, organization should always be. Because, I mean, look at your mission statements, look at your vision statements. What does it say? And if you're not a political organization, you're not promoting, getting out there and voting and creating policy change, then you're not really fulfilling your mission or your vision.
Definitely, healthcare is political.
Absolutely.
And truth be told,
Hands down.
yeah, truth be told, so many of our, so many of like the brands and things that we see every day, so many of these brands and these companies are very much so political because they fund all kinds of money into these different entities, political entities that they, back and agree with, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, it's most of this information is visible. You can see a lot of this information and be able to see, oh, this company supports, these individuals or this candidate. Is there. The information is there, is out there. I think everybody in some way needs to be at least a little political enough to realize that if you are not, then you are, impacting yourself in a negative way. And I think to myself sometimes when I'm just sitting there and just, the wind's blowing and nothing else to do, what in the world, why are we still debating and discussing some of the same things that we've been talking about for 50, 60, 70, 800 years, and it's because the same people are in positions of power, the same individuals. It may not be the same person, but it's the same people in the sense that they have the same ideas and the same morals, and their whole their background is the same. And for us to really be able to come together and bring about true change, there has to be a difference in who is representing us, who's at the table. We're in some of these meetings all the time and they're talking about people having a seat at the table. Well, sometimes we have to go and bring our seat and sit it at the table regardless of who wants us to be there.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And if I'm at the table, I'm not just going to be sitting and looking. Like, I'm trying to listen too. So.
Right. Awesome. So again, I want to remind everybody that next Tuesday is National Voter Registration Day. Make sure you register to vote. This is very important. Did anyone have anything else to say in regards to voting before we wrap up this evening?
I have one thing to say. Getting your VRD is the easiest thing to do, and you can do it online for free. So if you want to help people get that certification and be able to do voter registration, you can do so at what's the website?
Come on, spokesperson.
The website. How did you say it?
Huh?
Oh, wait, I have it.
The Dallas County
Votes.org.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yes, and you can do it virtually online.
Awesome.
The only thing I would say is, if you're not really sure, the first step is going and finding the information for yourself, like not listening to anyone, going and finding out. And if you're not understanding, is doing a whole bunch of reading. I remember before I actually did anything, I actually just went to like dallascounty.org and just looked at pamphlets to find out like who was in my district and what they stood for, and learned a little bit about voting and understanding even more than I even knew. So the information is out there. You just have to go find it, even if that means you do it on your own.
Absolutely.
And one of my favorite resources is the League of Women Voters. So the League of Women Voters always puts out a voting guide, and it's a nonpartisan voting guide. So they send out like a survey to all of the candidates, asking them their positions on various things. And then they publish those as they were sent in. If you don't send one in, you don't get published. So that's a really good, and I think you can take that into the voting booth with you. If there are particular, groups that you agree with, they may endorse, like, I keep referring back to Houston, y'all, I'm sorry. Like, we have an LGBTQ political caucus, or there's a Black Democrats caucus, or Hispanic caucus, and they all endorse candidates, and usually they print out their endorsements and they hand those out at the polls. So if you're not entirely sure who you want, but if you kind of share the values of this group, then that's one way to figure out who's on the ballot and who you might want to support as well.
And one of the things that I did is I looked at the sample ballot, like DallasCounty.org. They do have a sample ballot that's listed, and you're able to actually, I just went and looked up people to find out information about them, if I wasn't exactly for sure too.
Also, if you don't have any opportunities to vote soon and you want to make a difference, you can attend the Dallas Reproductive Liberation March on October 2nd.
Just see me there.
And then also, Texas is one of the most restrictive, most difficult places in the United States. We have to really get more educated about the whole process and not be afraid of learning about it and sharing that information in a way that resonates with others. We just don't have enough education behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like we're gonna have to make a task force. One more thing.
First, we're gonna get Ted to do it. He's gonna run for office. So
That's what I was gonna say. Ted for city council.
Well, I do want to thank you all for joining us today. This is a really great conversation. Of course, this isn't where the conversation ends. We will continue the conversation. If you're looking, for somewhere to go and register, definitely reach out to us, and we can assist you with that. But yeah, this is very important, and we want to continue to push forward this message. Again, thank you all for the individuals here on my panel today. I appreciate you all being here, and thank you all, everyone who watched, who's looking in via Facebook or YouTube. And we will see you all next time. Bye.